or Maidín, is our boss, Claire and my boss, at Nearform. Nearform is a small Irish company. It's a consultancy, about 150 employees. And they have historically been a solutions engine, like they'll build solutions for customers. But there's this pattern they noticed where people like the outcome of an engagement with this little company. They decide they want to acquire it. We say no, that would break what we do, so no thank you. And they say, well, okay, can you teach me how you did this? And at that point, they're basically teaching InnerSource. They just didn't have a name for it before they met me. So they already had a practice of teaching InnerSource specifically to large consultancies that take them on as consultants. And with me arriving, what we're trying to do is get to a place where we're offering a formal set of things that you can engage Nearform for. And my interest in it, again, is mostly to promulgate InnerSource. I would also like to have some successful clients, more than I already have. But it's meant to be a give back to the community. So Cian is the author of Open Sources Art. And we're trying to get audio with him. That's what's going on, because we had to change the projection method. But this is a talk that he gives, a short talk about what Open Sources Art means to him and why it's important. And he's going to do this for us from Ireland because he wasn't able to travel here on sort of last minute notice. He was supposed to physically be here, but he needed to stay home for his family. So, getting there? What are we doing? Should we do the microphone up to the computer thing?
You can't hear us, we can't hear them.
Going through the, because of the VGA being connected? Yeah, change the input. Did you say external microphone?
Yep.
How many of you use Zoom? It's a good tool, isn't it? It's way better than some of the others that are out there. Yeah, do that again, but join with computer audio. Oh, a little bit more about the InnerSource Summits. So this is InnerSource Summit 9. That means we've done this 9 times now. We do... Oh, yay! We do an event in Europe and one in the US every year. And this year we're out in Asia.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yay! All right. So...
You sound fabulous, everyone. You sound lovely.
How you doing, Cian?
I'm doing well.
Looks like you're in your office.
That is very, very perceptive of you, Denise.
Well, I do spend a fair amount of time in that room. Are we ready to go?
Yeah.
Excellent. I give you Cian or Maidín.
So, hello. I don't know if you can see me somewhere on the screen, but yeah, my name is Cian Maidín. It's really, really good to be able to present to you today. Apologies that I can't be there. I'm gutted that, in fact, that I can't be there, but I do get to present to you some thoughts and concepts that are very, very close to my heart, and that I've been talking about person to person for quite a while, but this is actually the first time we've ever got to talk to a group of people about this stuff. So, yeah, my apologies, I can't be there. My wife had a really, really bad accident a couple of weeks ago, and things are a little bit up in the air at home, so I had to make a last-minute call not to travel. So anyway, here we are. Open source is art. I think it was some famous philosopher, some ancient philosopher once said that anything done to perfection is art. If you think about it, day in, day out, there are little things in your life that you do, and you kind of perfect them over time. Like stretching done to perfection is kind of art. Yawning done to perfection, in my case, can most certainly be art. Signing my name can be art. Kicking a ball can be art. Scoring a goal can be art. All these little things can be art. I'm here today to explain to you why open source is art. And in order to do that, first I wanted just to give you a little bit of background on who I am and why I'm here. I'm from a small town in the southeast of Ireland, I started a company, Nearform, about 8 years ago now. The reason that the name of the company is Nearform is because it's my belief that every system, every time we take a snapshot of what's going on in the world, that is the actual picture in itself, and there's no final state. We're always in a state of flux. We are as a company living proof that the world has utterly changed. We're a global software company. In fact, we're not only a global software company, but we're a global software company that produces software on which every single person, I would imagine, in the room in Baltimore relies upon, even though you don't know that. We're involved heavily in the JavaScript and Node.js ecosystem. We saw this trend that there was kind of it had become time for a new technology to start to become popular because the existing technologies that we were using 8 or 9 years ago were no longer fit for the purpose that we wanted to use them for. So we became involved in the Node.js world, and as of today, we're about 150 people. We're scattered all over the world, with a little office in Ireland and some other little offices in different parts. But as of today, about 1 billion modules every month written by people at Nearform are downloaded globally. If you look at Netflix this evening on your web browser, that's using some modules from Nearform. If you listen to the iCloud streaming music service, that uses modules from Nearform. If you use MasterCard's mobile banking apps, that uses modules from Nearform. And we are proof that the world has changed because we are 150 people based out of the southeast of Ireland. So as a company, we're a vocational software company. The people who work here tend to work here because they're passionate and they want to work with people who are also passionate. And as a company, we like to think of ourselves as acting as a bridge from a world of idealism and idealists to the world of business and realism. We're seeing this phenomenon happen in the world of software. It really has become clear to me in the last couple of years that it looks very much like an artistic movement that I studied back in the day. So once upon a time, I wanted to go to art college, and for some strange reason, I ended up doing computer science, thinking that I would end up becoming a creative type person. And around the time that I decided I wanted to go to art college, I became really, really interested in the Impressionists. They're pretty much the most popular wave in art that people that people all over the place know about. And so with Impressionism, some very interesting things started happening, and they led to a new movement in art. So to begin with, we had the invention of the camera. Up until the age of the Impressionists, artists would, in many cases, try and create photorealistic representations of landscapes or portraits of families and people. But with the advent of the camera, all of a sudden, it became much more economic to hire a photographer than try and pay an artist to make a picture. And also around the same time, we had this advent of rolls of paint. So traditionally, painters would have to mix up their paints and sit in their studios and create their masterpieces. But with the advent of rolls of paint, artists were able to go out into the countryside and explore nature. And when this happened, at the same time as the camera became a possibility, also people started to think a lot more about the nature of light and the nature of how we comprehend pictures. So people started, generally in the Impressionist times, they started to paint pictures really quickly and try and capture something that like a scene with a particular set of lights and conditions that didn't last for very long. Another thing that happened in the Impressionist era, primarily in France and around Paris, was a number of the early Impressionists started to hang around together in a cafe in Paris, and they would have heated debates, sometimes to the level where they'd end up having sword fights about aspects of their art and the philosophy of the time. I guess the artists in the Impressionist movement were quite lucky that the ones who ended up in this cafe in Paris were all happened to be lucky enough to live in a place that was close enough to this community so that they could take part in something entirely new being created. And then from that movement, we have all this beautiful art that we see in our lives today. So we have quite an interesting group of quite eclectic and visionary people that had this belief that at the same time in history they all started to zone in, sometimes independently of one another, on this new vision for art and this new vision for the world, and they were lucky enough that they got to spend time together and explore their art. So what does all this have to do with, open source? So in 2009, an upstate New York math PhD dropout by the name of Brian Dahl had this view of software and the art of software engineering that it had become too complex. It wasn't fun anymore, and that there was a new way to enable programmers to develop software. So he was once quoted as saying, "I want programming computers to be like coloring with crayons and playing with Duplo blocks." Ryan invented Node.js, which is an extremely popular programming system for building many of the new types of applications that we have today. And similarly to the impression of folks out there, you know, we started to think about how quickly we could express what we wanted to build as a piece of software. And this was one of the tools that enabled us to do that. Some of the other factors that really led to the enablement of this community, first of all, the World Wide Web. You know, we no longer have this constraint of having physical places where people need to meet in order to discuss their ideas. People can connect on the internet. You know, one place in particular where a lot of the really interesting conversations and things that led to the creation of Node.js is a place called StackVM, which is an IRC room, which you know, I think still you'll find quite a lot of interesting things going on there. The other thing which has had a huge impact on you know, global communities of software programmers to enable them to connect, discover what the other people are doing, and collaborate with one another is GitHub. You know, we would consider Node.js to be a post GitHub phenomenon, where the characteristics of this community are quite unique compared to pre-GitHub communities. I think one of the most important things to think about when it comes to the you know, the Node.js community in particular is that we're now in a world where centralization, this capitalism or capital based business model is and way of thinking about things has started to come apart in places. The people that created this technology are completely distributed across the world. There are as many people in Europe and Asia as there are in the US and other parts of the world working on this technology. And so the really interesting thing is that instead of thinking of this art as an older type of picture, it's more akin to tapestry of humanity coming together to give birth to something new. So what's very interesting, you know, the 8 people, they look quite like impressionist painters on this slide, most of which have had a tremendous impact upon the world of the open source, you know, the Node.js open source world. You know, they didn't start to work on this stuff because somebody was paying them. They started working on this stuff because they had something which they saw, which they wanted to work on, and they started to work upon this thing on their own. And some of them were lucky enough then to have a boss or a job which would support them in their work. And so the really big opportunity today is that we have a group of people which are akin to the Impressionist artists. We just need to find a way to try and support the work that they do. So I like to think of running community events. I've organised an event called, a couple of community events and meetups and things over the years, but I like to think of an event as a petri dish. You advertise on the internet, you bring all these different types of people to the event, and then you sit back and you watch what happens to grow from that collection of people that have been brought together, and you don't really know what's going to come out, but it's a beautiful thing to be able to provide, a canvas for creation, so that others can create. So I guess my experience and my journey with starting Nearform, and I view it as an experiment in some ways, because there's all of this really, really interesting work going on that we like to try and support. We support as much of that work as we possibly can, but we haven't found a sustainable way to support that work. We run events and we do community things, and I would encourage anybody sitting there today to try and, if they can, help to organize community events themselves, and see if they can help just to move forwards. We have this idea that this is a painting of a poet, an impoverished poet. We have this idea that just because open source technology is being used in big business, and that the people who have written the open source technology are able to support themselves, and the reality is that they're actually not at this point in time. And so one of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to find ways to create some level of sustainability in the open source community. And the ways that we have a presence within enterprise and business are they really need some work. We have this issue that if somebody becomes very, very famous, they write a module that everybody uses, some big company will come and give them a job, and they'll be really happy and stuff. But that means that we have a bias towards people that have been successful. So as an industry, we need to find a way that we can support all the people who are trying, and then provide a pathway forward so that various people will become successful. But we've got to support as many as we can. So why InnerSource? Our experiment with trying to help the open source community grow as one which is very nicely met with the InnerSource movement, and so our view is that, if enterprise can start to become more involved in the open source movement and start to contribute back to the open source world, then there's a huge potential, for everybody to become part of this artistic movement, and for beautiful new things to happen. I guess what I'd like to do is just encourage everybody sitting there today to look at the person next to you in the audience, and ask each other what you can do to help this movement to go forward, and to prosper. I guess I very much like to say to Jacob, who's organising the event today, that the work that you're doing around municipal open source is really, really interesting and quite inspirational. I hope that it's going to take over the world. So with that, thank you very much, and hope you have a great conference.
Thank you, Cian. We'll speak soon.